Hello, my name is Michelle Daneshrad. I'm a collaborative attorney and a mediator, and I'm here with Dr. James Walton. And we're going to have a conversation about what it is that people deal with when they go through conflict. So James, tell us a little bit about you.
Michelle, first, thank you so much for inviting me on. This is a really wonderful opportunity to spend some time talking with you. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I've been so since the early 90s. And I have my doctorate in clinical psychology. And I have been a collaborative professional with your group now for the last year. And I have to say, I absolutely love it.
Oh, wonderful. And our group is San Fernando Valley Collaborative Professionals.
Yes.
Okay, great. So now, James, you being a mental health professional,
yes.
When people are, now we deal with different legal issues, people dealing with different legal conflicts will come to our group. We're going to focus on divorce right now, okay? So when families are going through divorce, tell me, is that important, what emotions they have? What are they really dealing with?
There are so many emotions that take place when people are going through divorce. It feels to most people like a train wreck. Mm-hmm. And there are fish hooks in their heart, feeling so much pain in this experience. Not only are they dealing with the issues that you were talking about, the legal issues, they're dealing with the emotional issues as well. They're dealing with the dissolution of a long-term relationship. They're looking at patterns that have taken place in their families, maybe over decades for divorces that took place before. They're working with their children. They're trying to protect their kids from the damage that takes place in a divorce. A lot of times in divorce, parents are accusing each other back and forth, and they'll use the children as pawns, not realizing the injury that's taking place to those kids that will last a lifetime and maybe present itself in future generations, completely unaware that would occur.
So here's what I'm seeing, right? People dealing with their marriage falling apart or dividing.
Yes.
And so their whole life has to change from being married, having a family, to having different households. So there is a threat to survival.
Yes.
Right? They feel threatened to survival.
Yes.
And when you are dealing with survival, there's all sorts of emotions, right? And so that you can't think clearly.
What happens when people are threatened and when they're going through divorce, it's an enormous threat, is they have fight, flight, or freeze. Those are the three responses that we're programmed to do. If you fight, you break out the claws and you're attacking each other. If it's flight, you retreat and you run away. And if you freeze, it feels like you can't do anything, you just stop.
Right. And each person may find themselves being any one of those things in the conflict. And
Absolutely.
And so the litigation, which is the traditional way of dealing with divorce, is fighting. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes. And so what happens in litigation? People are not thinking straight, right? And they come to attorneys, traditional attorneys, and the attorneys are trained to fight,
Right.
meaning that they are trained to just win over the other, right? And so what happens is people are not realizing. Now we know there's a cost to fighting, just a regular fighting, right? We can talk, there are different ways people fight. It could be a physical fight, it could be a law court, courtroom fight.
Yeah, well, Michelle, I'm actually glad you brought up the idea of fighting, because what happens when the attorneys are fighting, they're also amping up their clients. Mm-hmm. And they get them to fight as well. And what you find oftentimes in a divorce situation when it's being litigated is that the couple comes to some kind of agreement through the litigation. And then the other side will say, I can get you better. And the other side says, you're getting ripped off. The attorneys will make their clients angry at each other. And they begin to amp up the emotions. And they get people to fight and to get angry. And when it comes time to make the settlement, one person feels like they've lost, and the other person might feel like they've won. But in reality, both people feel like they've lost because their attorneys have raised their hopes so high that they can never achieve what they're trying to get. And they both feel wounded, taken advantage of, and hurt when they walk away from this relationship. And I think that is what we're trying to prevent in this experience for them.
Now, there are three, I don't know if people are aware, and we want to educate people that there are different pathways to dealing with their conflict. The traditional is litigation.
Yes.
And people get into it not knowing what are the costs. So they may know or not know that there's unpredictable legal fees,
Right.
amounts of legal fees.
Right.
There are unpredictable amounts of legal costs,
Yes.
right? But what they don't know, that you and I know, are what happens is that what they're really dealing with in a divorce doesn't get resolved in litigation.
That's right, because you cannot solve an emotional issue through litigation.
Okay, great. Now, what happens when the emotional issues are not resolved? That's what I want to hear from you.
So much happens when the emotional issues aren't resolved. People carry these issues for the rest of their lives. They carry the wound. They pass it on to their children. They pass it on to the next relationships that they encounter. Just because someone gets a divorce doesn't mean that they're divorcing the entire experience. They're divorcing that other person, but they're bringing all of their experiences, all their injury, all their pain across the border with them.
Okay.
And frequently, they will take that to the next relationship, and they'll react it. They'll recreate that in the next relationship.
Yeah, because it's not resolved.
That's right.
Then I bet you that because it's not resolved, they recreate the same kind of relationship so that they can get it resolved. I mean, this could be something that that's why I have you here, like as a psychotherapist, because it's not resolved, then people want to relive it.
That's exactly what happens.
Right.
People try to heal the past by recreating it in the present.
Okay, great. So you're never going to be done unless those emotional issues are addressed, and they don't get addressed in litigation.
That's right.
Okay, so now we have a way, which is the collaborative process, where we do address those emotional issues. Now, there is mediation,
Yes.
where people compromise and settle. And people think that with settlement means that both people are unhappy. That's a common opinion. Now, in our collaborative process, that's not what we're up to. We're not up to people having any resentment or regret. Like they think they had to settle, to compromise, and always feel like it's still not resolved.
People actually come to agreement in this process. And it's shown that when people come to agreement, they're more satisfied with the result that they get later.
Yeah.
They don't feel the need to go and to relitigate a case if they feel satisfied with the experience that they've had.
Okay, great. Now, it's not the result they reach, right? It is the process.
It is the process. The best way to heal from an emotional injury is with the people with whom you have that emotional injury. We can heal it later, but it takes a lot longer and it takes a lot more therapy to work through it.
Right. So this is actually, this divorce process, the collaborative process,
Right.
allows people to resolve it with the person, their spouse, once and for all, so
That's
they
right.
can be done. So we bring finality to
Yes.
people through divorce. And what happens with finality is that they can really have a future. Without it, they have the same thing repeating itself, right?
That's right. It repeats itself over and over in the future in a bid for healing.
Yeah.
And in the process, it makes things worse for them over their life. But if they can solve it with the person with whom they have the conflict at the beginning, they free themselves to move forward with a new experience in their lives and opening up to new processes that haven't been available to them.
So they can open themselves up to new kinds of people, not the same kind of people they had the relationship with.
That's right.
But also productivity. So we talked about legal costs, right? We talked about time. I don't think we did talk about it, but it takes unpredictable amount of time to go through a litigation divorce, especially nowadays, James, where the court system is so congested because of the budget cuts.
Right.
People don't get hearings for months.
Right.
And then, so there's a lot of time investment, money investment. But now what people don't see is that when you have unresolved emotional issues, you can't be productive. your
That's right.
productivity suffers. So in the area of career, in the area of finances, in the area of relationship, all of that suffers. So the quality of life suffers.
Michelle, there's one more area, and that's the area of privacy.
Yeah.
And when you have a litigated divorce, it is for the entire world to see. Every agency is able to look into what was discussed, what you talked about.
Yeah.
The wonderful thing about collaborative divorce is that everything is private.
Yes, confidential.
It's all confidential. Nobody's looking over your shoulder as to what you're talking about. And that's important also for the mental health, because people can walk out of our meetings feeling completely confident that it's private.
And so that they feel it's a safe place for them to deal with their emotions.
That's right.
I want the people who are listening to hear, how do their emotions get addressed in the collaborative process?
Well, what I actually do in the collaborative process is I help people to communicate with each other more clearly. And by improving their communication, we help to improve their emotional responses towards each other. So we handle things like anger, we handle things like anxiety, we handle things like fear, and we work together on clarifying how they communicate so that there isn't miscommunication taking place. And by doing that, we actually speed up the process of the divorce. People are able to get through the process much more quickly. We're helping them to clearly express what it is that they do need out of the relationship, what they do need out of the divorce.
Okay, so it's not, just to let you guys know, it's not an adversarial taking positions kind of a deal. And with them saying whatever needs to be said.
That's right.
So that they can be done with it.
That's
That's
right.
what happened in the process. And also, we, by role models, teach families how to communicate, how to listen, so that you really understand what's going on, rather than act from what you think is happening, your reactions, all the stuff that's been going on before.
Michelle, actually you brought up a really good point when you were talking about listening, because it's very difficult for couples when they're in the middle of a divorce to listen to each other. There's so many fears going on inside of them, and one of the things that I do is I actually help them to listen. If they're not able to, I help them to hear what's being said, and I help them to reinterpret what is being communicated into a way that maybe is more palatable for them to take in.
Yeah, you know what, James, what I just thought about, we don't, it's automatic for us not to listen, especially if you're in conflict with one another.
That's right.
So it's kind of like putting two radios where people are just saying with their internal dialogue and just putting it on speaker and not listening. And we create the partnership that's been lost, or so a whole new partnership. That's why we're in the business of reconstructing the family so that they create new relationship based on communication.
We actually work at reducing or even eliminating the distortion that takes place in the experience, so that people can communicate much more clearly with each other. It's not an easy process. It's not a process that people feel great about, but at the end, they can certainly be proud of what they have been able to accomplish in being able to dissolve a marriage in a way that is more friendly and less destructive to themselves, to their families, and to their future.
Okay, so here's what are the benefits of collaborative process. Okay, so you have a whole team supporting you. You reach an agreement that you're satisfied with. You have freedom.
Yes.
You have freedom. You have a new relationship. You have communication skills you didn't have before. And you have peace of mind.
And you have a sense of self-respect. Because there's a feeling of helplessness when you litigate, but there's a sense of empowerment when you collaborate and you work together at solving an issue. And that is something that you take with you the rest of your life, and you can apply it to everything else.
Great. So now that is why we do what we do, because we are fulfilled by what we provide for families. Because we do make a difference. And that's more fulfilling than anything else that can be offered by litigation.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, James.
You're welcome.